1987. The world was grooving to the sound of synthesizers. The Simpsons debuted as short sketches on The Tracy Ullman Show, and people were debating which was a better time travel device, a DeLorean or a TARDIS. While all this was happening, one mustachioed plumber was quietly shaping pop culture and, well, my entire childhood. Welcome to the games that made us. Today, we're diving into the game that started it all, for me at least, Super Mario Bros. And honestly, this game started it for a lot of people, and it didn't just start the love of gaming for my generation, it saved video games as we know them. Ah yes, the 80s. Dripping in neon and shoulder pads, personal computers were barely finding their way into homes, and MTV, well, they were still playing music videos, because, you know, the M stands for music. But not everything was fun and games. The US was facing a Cold War stalemate with Russia, the Iran-Contra affair was dominating headlines, and Black Monday, well, that was the biggest stock market crash since the Great Depression, and man, that shook the economy. But amid all that chaos, there was one place that you could escape to. A magical kingdom ruled by turtle dragon things, where plumbers fought for love and mushrooms, they made you stronger and not crazy. Enter Super Mario Bros. Now, before the launch of the NES in '86, the video game industry in the United States, it wasn't exactly winning. The big crash in '83, that left companies bankrupt and left gamers everywhere skeptical. Then, like a knight in shining armor atop a white horse, here comes Shigeru Miyamoto and Nintendo, a Japanese company originally known for making playing cards. They redefined what video games could be, and they set the stage for every video game ever made in the future. Now, Miyamoto, he had already wowed audiences with his game Donkey Kong in 1981, but Super Mario Bros.? Now that was next level. Released in 1985 for the Nintendo, it combined innovative mechanics like side-scrolling and the unforgettable music made by Koji Kondo. And who could forget that first level? No instructions, no tutorials, you just jump right in and you sink or swim. And somehow, we just knew what to do. Now that was a masterclass in intuitive design. By 1987, the NES was everywhere. With games like Super Mario Bros., The Legend of Zelda, and Metroid, it had become a cultural juggernaut. Over 60 million consoles were sold worldwide, proving that video games, they weren't just a fad, they were in fact the future. Oh, and let's not forget the commercials, the golden age of commercials.
The Nintendo Entertainment System. Now you're playing with power.
Now you're playing with power! Oh, that became the battle cry of a generation. But while Mario was in there curb stomping a bunch of Goombas, the world in '87, it was a bit of a different place. Let's just say it was eventful. President Reagan, he delivered his iconic "Tear Down This Wall" speech in Berlin, aimed at Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev. And meanwhile in the UK, The Legend of Zelda finally made its debut, showing that Europe was just as enchanted with Nintendo's magic as the United States was. Back on Earth, as in the entire Earth, NASA was planning its return to space after the Challenger disaster, and in technology, IBM introduced its PS2 computer. No, not the PlayStation 2, the PS/2 computer. The tech revolution, it was gaining momentum, and in gaming, it was riding shotgun right there with it. By 1987, Mario wasn't just a game character, he was a cultural icon. Lunchboxes, cartoons, even cereal. The Super Mario Bros. Super Show was just around the corner, can't forget that classic. It added some live-action Mario to your Saturday morning cartoons, which was pretty awesome, if I can say myself. And let's not forget his unofficial role as the ambassador for video gaming. In fact, if you think about games back in the 80s and the 90s, your mom or your grandma, your dad, they didn't say, go play video games. They said, why don't you go play Nintendo? It didn't matter if you had a Nintendo or an Atari or a Sega. The cultural impact of NES and Mario made everything a Nintendo. For millions of kids, Mario, he was more than just pixels on a screen. He was their friend. He was a guide, a mentor. He taught us that perseverance, timing, and a little creativity, they can help us conquer any castle, even if we have to do several castles in a row to find the right one. Now, while all this focused on 1987, wasn't 87 the year after the NES released in 86? Well, of course it was. But I'm talking about 87 because that's when I got a Nintendo. I will never forget Christmas morning, 1987. I walked out into the living room of our small family home, and underneath the tree was an unmistakable box the size of a Nintendo. And next to it was like a 12-inch CRT television. Now, for all of you 90s and 2000s and later kids, you're used to having 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 TVs throughout your house. Back in the 80s, we had one. It was like a 19-inch console TV that sat in the living room, and we all gathered around it to watch TV or watch movies or, later on, play video games. But underneath the tree was another television. 2 TVs in one household? Wow, we were thrilled. And next to it was another box that was wrapped up. And when we tore that thing open, there it was. The NES, the Nintendo Entertainment System. In the box was the console, the controllers, and the game, the pack-in game, Super Mario Bros. And Duck Hunt. Before we had a Nintendo, we had an Atari 2600, and that's the original console that I got my start on, but I don't remember the names of any of those games because I was so young, I just picked them up and stuffed them into the system until I found the one that I liked. I always knew what it looked like. It was a tank game. It was probably called Tank if I go back and look for it. But the Nintendo and Mario, that was my first step into real video gaming. That's what actually turned me into a gamer. Now, in our small 3-bedroom house with 1 bathroom and 1 living room, there was really no place to put a second TV, so we put it in my parents' room. They had the master bedroom, which basically meant there was just enough room next to their bed to stuff a TV into the corner. So there we would go every single day after school. We'd pile into my parents' room, jump onto their bed, fire up the Nintendo, and we'd play through level after level after level of Super Mario Bros. It wasn't until we moved the Nintendo to the big TV in the living room that we could actually play Duck Hunt on there because, well, Duck Hunt requires you to be a little bit away from the TV, and we couldn't do that in the confines of my parents' room. The longevity that we see with Super Mario Bros. Is something that we just don't see with today's games. My wife Erica and I, we still play Mario 1, 2, and 3. We'll fire up the Switch, put it up on the TV, and we'll hand the controller back and forth just like the good old days, taking turns as Mario and Luigi. The fact that these games are still accessible to us and our kids and going to be their kids someday, it truly tells a tale of how these games were built to stand the test of time. It's easy to look back at Super Mario and think, wow, that's pretty simple compared to today's games, but simplicity, that was its genius. It didn't need 4K graphics or ray tracing. It had heart, innovation, and that unforgettable bloop when you jumped on a Koopa Troopa. In 87, man, the world was changing fast, politically, culturally, and technologically. But through it all, there was Mario. He was jumping over pitfalls and giving us hope that every problem had a solution, even if that solution involved some fireballs and going down some pipes. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through my personal gaming history. I'm going to do a lot more of these videos in the future, and so if you enjoyed this, don't forget to stomp that like button, collect that subscribe coin, and maybe leave me a comment about your favorite Mario memory. Until next time, keep playing, keep laughing, and remember, no matter how tough that boss fight is, there's always a way to win.